What if protecting fisheries didn't start at sea, but in space? Every day, millions of fishers go to sea to feed the planet, but global fisheries are under pressure. Illegal fishing, climate change, vanishing stocks, ghost vessels that disappear from radar. Up to 30% of fish stocks are overexploited, and 50 million people depend directly on fisheries for their livelihoods. So how do we protect fish, ecosystems, and the people behind them? In this episode of BlueTech Around the World, I speak with Hervé Galabert, Director of Sustainable Fisheries Applications at CLS, a global pioneer in satellite-based ocean monitoring. We talk about how satellites track fishing vessels in real time, how dark vessels are detected even when they switch off the signals, how digital tools improve safety at sea for small-scale fishers, and how data can finally bring small-scale fisheries to the decision-making table. Because digital transformation in fisheries is not just about technology, it's about people, livelihoods, and the future of our oceans. Listen now on BlueTech Around the World.
BlueTech Around the World, the reference podcast for blue technologies and ocean innovation. Welcome to BlueTech Around the World, the reference podcast for blue technologies and ocean innovation, powered by Blue Connection. I'm your host, Marie-Luce, and in this show, we explore how innovation is reshaping our relationship with the ocean. If you care about how we feed the planet sustainably, how technology can help us protect marine ecosystems, and how small-scale fishers can thrive in a changing world, this episode is for you. Here is the reality. Global fisheries are under immense pressure, from illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing to biodiversity loss, climate change, and the growing demand, of course, for traceable and transparent seafood. The sector is facing challenges on all fronts. And in this context, digital technologies are no longer nice to have. They are becoming essential tools to build a more sustainable, resilient, and transparent seafood system. And to guide us through this fascinating journey, I'm thrilled to welcome Hervé Galabert, Director of Sustainable Fisheries Applications at CLS, a global pioneer in satellite-based Earth observation. Hervé is an agricultural engineer by training with over 15 years of international experience in trade and leadership. For the past 4 years, he has been leading CLS Sustainable Fisheries Division, traveling around the world to work directly with coastal communities and bringing cutting-edge technologies to the front line of ocean conservation and fisheries management. So Hervé, welcome to BlueTech Around the World. It's a real pleasure to have you here today.
Hello, Mirilu. It's a real pleasure for me to be invited to talk into your podcast. I'm really thrilled and honored, and I hope I can contribute to get more awareness and insight on small-scale fisheries, which is really a passionate subject.
I'm sure about that, and we can already feel the passion in your voice. So before we dive into the technologies and fishery, I'd love to start with your story. You have quite a unique background, agriculture, space, ocean. So can you briefly tell us how you came to work at the crossroad at space, ocean, and fisheries?
All right. Frankly speaking, Marilu, it was pure chance, actually. As you said, I trained as an engineer and I've always been interested in technology. I'm also the son of a farmer, which is typically a primary sector activity like fisheries. So for me, it was quite natural to get fully involved into fisheries. And quite honestly, as I said previously, it's fascinating. So I love it.
Okay, so passion, family, and also the academic background. Great. So now for our listener, really let's start with the basics. We hear the term of digitalization of fisheries more and more often, but it's not always clear what it actually means. So Hervé, could you explain it in simple terms, like what does digitalization of fisheries mean in practice?
Okay, I'm going to try my best here. Actually, it's a broad concept, right? That can touch every part of the fisheries value chain, from the ocean to the plate, farm to fork. Maybe it's a notion that you've heard of. And typically it includes several things. It's about data collection and monitoring. So VMS being one of the way of collecting data. It's about fisheries management as well, real-time data for decision making. It's about digital licensing and permitting, predictive analysis as well. And then it's also about traceability and transparency. We talk a lot about blockchain, for instance, and digital traceability. That's one tool that we use into digitalization of fisheries. It's also about compliance and enforcement, and that's really important. I mean, remote surveillance, like with drones, satellites, AI-powered images recognition to detect illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Finally, I think you have to integrate into the digitalization of fisheries economical and social benefits and aspects. Economical could be like digital marketplaces. We're at the very beginning of that story here for digital marketplaces. It gives direct access to markets, to buyers, to fishermen that wouldn't have access without digitalization, for instance. And then you have many more subjects, but you can include banking, insurance, that are like usual subjects talking about fisheries.
Okay, so just to add a bit of context for our listener, also there is like digitalization and digital transformation that are two terms we often use together, but they are not exactly the same thing because, as I mentioned, digitalization is about introducing digital tools, collecting data, tracking vessel, reporting catches electronically, for example. It's the what. And digital transformation goes a step further. It's about how we use the data to rethink the way we manage fisheries, as you mentioned. So it's not just about having the data. It's about integrated into daily activities. And so that is what truly change outcomes, actually. And I know that with CLS, you're really involved in all the part of the digital transformation process. And so once we understand that, what kind of data are we talking about? What can satellites and digital tools actually tell us that's useful for fishers and managers?
What kind of data? All right. That's a tricky question, but you're right. There is a difference between digitalization and digital transformation, right? Maybe what I can start with, it's something that I know best, is satellite data. They really play a crucial role in modern fisheries management, for instance, by providing a wide range of data to support both, let's say, scientific knowledge, understanding of our ecosystems, and operational decision making as well. For instance, the first data of interest for us at CLS, but not only for us, but I think for fisheries as well, is vessel activity. For instance, you have several systems that coexist. You have AIS, which is automatic identification system, where you can track vessel position, speed, and the heading. And this is a public data available to everybody, okay? But that's a system that you can turn on and turn off, right? You have the VMS, which is also a system where you track vessel, you get their speed, you get their heading. So basically, you know where they are, where they're going. You can know what they're doing actually with it. And this is used by authorities to monitor their licensed fishing vessels. Okay, so that's one of the source of data. And for satellites, you have other technologies like SAR. We call it SAR. It's synthetic aperture radar. Basically, it's technology where you can, through imagery, you can detect vessels, even when AIS or VMS does not exist there. And it's really useful for spotting illegal fishing, for instance, IUU. And then you have what we call also Earth observation or ocean observation, right? It's basically, you can use satellites, to collect data on oceanographic conditions like sea surface temperature, chlorophyll, currents, upwelling zones, waves, sea surface, height, and salinity, which are all very, very important data or useful data for fisheries management. And then, of course, we got all the data collected from satellites, but not only, for environmental monitoring. So weather is the most obvious, for storm tracking, for instance. You can use those data for habitat mapping, coastal erosion, marine pollution detection as well. I would say digital transformation, okay, is having the ability to integrate different sources of data, all the data I was just talking about, into a relevant system where you can help the decision makers to make informed and good decisions. And that's the main challenge, I think.
Really interesting. And actually, sometimes we, forget that all this data come from space. It's difficult sometimes to make the link between space and ocean.
Indeed.
Something really concrete on our coast with fishermen on their boats. And after all this data from space. So thank you for showing us this connection and this link between the space and the ocean. And one important thing is that we know that fisheries globally are under strain, like nearly 30% of fish stocks are overexploited, according to FAO, and over 50 million people depend directly on fisheries for their livelihoods. So from your perspective, now that you have presented all the sources of data that you are gathering to, help make better decisions, what are the main challenges the sector is facing today? And why is traditional monitoring no longer enough?
Great question, actually. Today, fisheries, they face a, shall I say, complex mix of environmental, economic, and governance challenges. And traditional monitoring methods, while they're still important, they're no longer sufficient on their own. Key issues and why digitalization is especially critical to small-scale fisheries, it's because now we face overfishing, for instance, and stock depletion, which is critical because basically, some of the traditional fishermen, they just cannot find fish anymore, in some places because stocks is absolutely has disappeared. And you were saying like 30% of the fish stocks worldwide are now overexploited, and that's a real critical issue for traditional fisheries, right? You face challenges with, you were talking about illegal, unreported, and regulated fishing. Basically, are you fishing? It kind of undermines conservation efforts, and it's unfair. It's simply unfair from an economic, social, government's point of view. It's just unfair. It's basically cheating, right? And to fight IUU, you need, of course, let's say traditional means like patrols, inspections, but they're pretty costly and they're pretty limited in coverage. So I think, using satellite technology can help improve that fact, okay, and it can help reduce IUU fishing. Other challenges, well, one which is absolutely crucial and essential, and we know all nowadays about it, it's climate change, because climate change has a huge impact on oceans. It's shifting fish distribution. For instance, it's changing spawning grounds, basically where fishes are going to reproduce, so it has a huge impact on productivity of the fish stocks, And there again, I think satellite or space technology can help, first improve our understanding of the climate change and maybe somehow sometimes mitigate their impact, Fourth, I think fisheries, as you said, is a really traditional sector. It's a primary economical sector. And, well, it was a sector that was data poor. So you face a challenge on data gaps and fragmentation as well. There is a lot of data available, right? Not all the data is useful actually for fisheries management, okay? But most importantly, we have gaps. So I think space-based technology can fill part of these data gaps for a better understanding of fisheries management. And then fisheries, whether industrial or, again, traditional fisheries now, they face market pressures or difficulties for market access, and there, I think traceability, is really important because the consumer, we want to know where the fish we're consuming is coming from, or the seafood products are coming from. We usually want to know whether it's been legally fished or harvested, because I think it's part of the deal there. So basically what we want to know as consumer, is have a better understanding of the supply chain, and nowadays often there is a lack of transparency, and that's another challenge fisheries are facing nowadays.
Thank you very much for this big overview of the different challenges that fishers are facing today. And one topic that you mentioned earlier about the climate change, I remember attending an event organized by WWF regarding fisheries and sustainable practices. And there were a lot of fishermen and associations from different countries in the Mediterranean and Black Sea region. And one of the main impact of climate change was invasive species, like the blue crabs, for example, and that they have to adapt the techniques for fisheries. Just for the listener, small-scale fisheries, it's about 90% of the world's fishing workforce. So it's really huge. And I think that's a crucial point. And the fact that it's not just about technology, it's also about ensuring that fisheries can continue to feed communities, sustain economics, and also protect ecosystem in the long term. So great. So now let's talk about the tools themselves, because I think this is where it gets exciting. So as we mentioned, satellites are often seen as something abstract or distant, but they're actually at the heart of modern fishing management. So for listeners who might not be familiar, can you explain exactly how it works? How can you track these specific parameters from space? And beyond the satellite, I know that there are some IoT, so connected device installed on vessel or gear that transit through the satellite also, all these networks. So can you give us a little taste about the technological side behind all this data from space?
Okay, I'm going to try that. Just to say, just to come back a little bit on what you said on climate change, you were mentioning WWF in Mediterranean. We work with them a lot. They're really concerned about what's happening in Mediterranean Sea in terms of climate change and the impact on local communities and local fishermen. And we had several projects with them to try to give them more insight with space technology, on how climate change would affect, of course, the ocean conditions of the Mediterranean Sea. And it's really interesting to work on these subjects, but it's a long journey, long journey. So coming back to your question on how satellite is used, a few examples, right? First, I think one technology that is really important is Earth or ocean observation. It's been around for more than 40 years now, maybe 45 years, and basically it's a set of sensors, okay, where you're gonna measure different criteria. So for instance, sea level, it's called altimetry. So you measure the sea level and the evolution of the sea level. And that's one thing we do at CLS. Every year, for instance, we measure how the ocean is rising. Sometimes it's a couple of millimeters, sometimes it's half a centimeter, but satellites allow such a precise and accurate measure. So that's part of the Earth observation. As well, we measure the color of the ocean. Color of the oceans is a very important indicator of the level of zooplankton, phytoplankton, chlorophyll, basically into the ocean, and it's one of the basic information that you need to model afterwards the food chain, which is critical to all species, basically. We can use as well, as I said, satellite, to measure currents, waves, winds, which are all environmental criteria which are really important to understand or to better understand the ocean. Okay, and then you can integrate that data into models, ecosystemic models, to kind of try to understand first and predict what the ocean is going to do. That's mainly Earth observation. Then what was created again 45 years ago, and CLS as a let's say an important brick into that deployment, which was the GPS. Actually, at CLS, when CLS started in 1986, we were operating on behalf of the French Space Agency, which is called CNES, Centre National des Études Spatiales, in good French, and NOAA as well, which is the North American Oceanographic Agency. We were operating on for them a satellite constellation called Argos. Okay, with Argos, you could localize any sort of asset, and it was the first GPS. It was pretty simple, but it was the first GPS. And nowadays, of course, we use the different GPS constellation, Galileo, Baidu, and the American GPS too. Let's be fair here, they're much more effective. much more precise. But you use that to be able to locate fishing vessels or any sorts of assets. Actually, it's not only fishing vessels, of course, it could be other sorts of vessels. But yeah, GPS is something where basically with a tracker, you're in a position to tell where your fishing vessel is, how long it's going to be there, where probably it's going to go. Okay. And you collect all that data to, let's say, calculate, for instance, what we call the fishing effort, right? And fishing effort basically is the pressure you put on fish stocks for targeted species, right? And that's a really important data for scientists, for instance, for fish stocks evaluation. Okay, so GPS is a source of satellite data, which is really crucial and critical into fisheries management. And then you have other different technologies. You have many sorts of sensors now that can be used for fisheries management. One of them is optical imagery, for instance, or radar, what we call a SAR, that can be used to fight illegal fishing. For instance, you're in a position to take a picture of anywhere on the earth, on the ocean, on the land, whatever, and have a look to that picture and see whether there's something weird happening. So it's a technology that is available now. It's really expensive. It maybe not as useful as other technologies, but it exists, right?
Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to come back on illegal unreporting and unregulated fishing later, because I think it's a huge topic and you seem to have a lot of solution for that. But just, to recap, CLS really bring like the satellite constellation, the IoT device, everything, not only the data, but also how to deliver near real-time information.
And you're absolutely right, because I forget that point, because it's my day-to-day life, but it's satellites, we use them to collect data, all right? Not only to measure, but to collect data. Satellite connectivity, in areas where you don't have any other sorts of connectivity, like cellular network, for instance, in the middle of the ocean, you have no way of transmitting data from an asset to shore. Okay, and satellites are used for that. It's my day-to-day life, and I forgot to talk about it. Satellite connectivity, used to be really expensive. Now it's improving, but it's a way of collecting in real time data from areas where you just don't have any other option to collect data, and that's critical.
Yeah. So not only having the data, but also the transmission of the data.
Transmission of the data in real time.
Thank you very much for these points. And actually, I want to zoom on the small-scale fishery, because I think they are often the ones with the most to gain from digital tools, but also the least access to them. So how do you deal with that? What are the main concerns? Whether it's more like resource management, safety at sea, or accessing markets? You already give us a lot of application, but from your travel, from meeting them on the field, what are the main challenges and what are the tools that you're just presenting to us that are the most useful for them in their daily operation?
Okay, small-scale fishers, they face a unique set of challenges compared, for instance, to industrial fleets, fishing fleets. They have challenges spanning from resource management, safety at sea, market access as well. And all these three challenges, they're deeply interconnected. In terms of resource management, for instance, small-scale fishermen, often they operate informally with little or no data on catch reporting, for instance, that is collected. It's like they're invisible. They don't exist. So it makes it hard for regulators, scientific bodies, technical institutions, to assess their impact on fisheries management plans. So it's really, really important to have a small-scale fisheries to help them to become visible, let's say, because they kind of don't exist, which is not true, of course, but they're most of the time excluded from decision making, not included into management policies. That are most of the time these policies, they're designed for industrial fleets. And I think it's really crucial and critical to include artisanal fisheries into this policy making and decision making too.
So actually, what I understand is that if we have the data, we make them visible and we can have them at the table of the decision making.
Exactly. You have to make them visible, to be able to evaluate their impact. So bringing them to the table of decision making, making the decision makers as well aware that artisanal fisheries doesn't have just a small impact on fisheries management. It has a huge impact, I think FAO was saying that more than 50% of fish catches worldwide are done by artisanal fishermen, which is huge. So yeah, it's a way of having them to the table, and including them into the decision-making process. And that's really critical, I think, for their future.
And actually on this specific point, from the perspective of the local authorities, how do local authorities use also digitalization as a way to improve this sector?
Basically, when you're a decision maker, first of all, you need to make educated decisions, right? To make educated decisions, you need to collect as much data as you can, right? There are plenty of sources of data that are of interest for these authorities for fisheries management, okay? And not only space-based data, all right? Economical, social data. We at CLS, what we try to do with a lot of humility, right, is to supply tools to these authorities, usually National Fisheries Authority most of the time, supply them with tools where they can aggregate different sources of data. Of course, data that we can help them collect, like VMS, like ocean observation, like weather information, but data as well on the behavior of fishermen, whether industrial or small scale, like catch reporting. Okay. But if you have plenty of data, you need the tool to be able to use it. So that's what we do. We can provide them with tools to aggregate this data and make something with the data, make something that is of interest for them, that is of interest for their technical scientific institution that they work with too, that is useful to fishermen too. Right. That is useful as well to political decision makers, right? For them to be able to, let's say, deploy relevant and appropriated policies for fisheries management. So this is what we do. We can collect data, but we can also help our users and national authorities are part of our users, to make something of that data that is relevant for them, that is of use for them.
I had the chance to participate in a workshop organized by WWF Adria and WWF Mediterranean. It was in Split in Croatia, so it's a great place for a workshop. And it was focusing on like selective gear and sustainable practices for small-scale fisheries. And what struck me was really how much technology was part of the conversation and how the new generation of fishers is deeply engaged in this topic. Like they are environmentally aware, resilient, and eager to adapt tools that can support them in their, sustainable practices. But also, it was really clear that it was not just, we can't just show up like that with big and complex tech solutions. And I think that's really in this kind of context that the real transformation happened. And so I would be curious, could you share with us, with the listener, success stories where CLS technologies help empower a coastal community or improve the sustainability of local fisheries?
Yes, that will really be my pleasure to do that. One of the use cases, that will be really happy to, and that was a success for us, I will be really happy to share with you, was, in terms of improving safety of fishermen at sea. We've been deploying our solution, our trackers, into several countries for such a matter. In Papua New Guinea, for instance, and in Vanuatu as well. Not only there, but in these two countries, the main concern, the main challenge for the national authority was we know that every week fishermen die for different reasons. They have no safety net. So we would like to improve safety at sea, and part of the real success story that we have with those two countries, it was equipping the small scale fishing vessel with trackers where basically you would be able to know in real time where they are. So, for instance, if they are entering a storm or tough oceanic conditions, and on that tracker, we have what we call, it's not a safety button, it's an alert button. So basically, when you trigger this button, you send a message nearly in real time to the authority saying, hey, I have a problem here. It's not more specific than that, but basically you trigger an alert saying there is a fishing vessel which is facing an issue. Right. So there, the authority, they can gather means or mobilize effort, to try to recover and to save whether the fishing vessel or the crew at the same time, or try to get in touch with them, or try to share that knowledge with fishermen that will be around them, because there is a lot of solidarity, of course, within the fishermen community. So that's safety is really one thing which is, for us, I think, really, really important. Another success story I could share with you, it's a small use case, which is in France, actually. It's with a cooperative of fishermen from Tête. It's called the Satuan Cooperative, or Organization of Producers, and they are facing a challenge with wind farms, offshore wind farms, for instance. There are many projects to install new offshore wind farms to produce renewable electricity, which is, as a matter of fact, it's nice. I mean, in terms of having greener sources of energy, but it has an impact. For instance, when you install wind farms offshore, it has a potential impact on other activities and on fishing activities. And in that case, for instance, there are projects to install wind farms in fishing grounds, in places where traditional fishers have been fishing there for generations, and this is their source of living. And if you install wind farms where they fish, they're not allowed to fish anymore. Okay, so we were talking about making them visible again, and the use case we had with these fishermen was to again equip their fishing vessels with trackers, just to be able for them to be able to show to authorities, agencies, that, okay, it's nice to have wind farms, but hey, we are operating here, we are making a living out of it, and we can share the use of the sea, of the ocean, but we have to be part of the decision, and we have to be included into the decision of where we are going to install wind farms, for instance. And that's another use case, that we helped sort out. It's an ongoing project, actually, but it's again making fishermen visible, giving them the ability to say, hey, here we are. It's nice. You have a nice project. We agree with you, green energy and everything, but here we are. We live here, and and we're making our living with it. So making them visible, is really practical, and it's really important for them. It's just, bringing the fishermen to the table of making the decision, and that's another use case. And to me, it's a success story that we're really proud of.
I love the two success stories. Just on the second one, I love the idea of making them visible. Actually, in France, we have a specific model for these co-activities at sea. The fact that to compensate this, as there is a tax now, that operators who are operating on offshore wind farm, they have to pay, and that will be applied to support fishermen community.
Exactly.
So that's specific for France right now. I hope maybe other countries in Europe will follow this model. But if we didn't have this data in firsthand, saying, okay, they are fishermen and they have an impact on their activities, or maybe we could find a way to, adapt the business model and find a way to have these co-activities in the blue economy. So that's the first one. And for you, the first success stories, I also like it because sometimes, we focus on economic, productivities, environmental, but the first issue is the safety of the men at sea. And having just this alert button on the boat to be able to help them is something that seems just a basic point, but in a lot of countries, we don't have this kind of aspect. So having this technology on board, I think is really important. So thank you very much for sharing this great success story. So during our discussion, we talk a little about the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishes. I would say IUU, which is one of the biggest challenge in global fisheries. For those who don't really know about it, it's like a massive issue and a complex phenomenon. So some vessels switch off their AIS, so the automatic identification system, to go dark, fishing undetected in neighboring countries' waters, in marine protected areas, or in zones reserved for juvenile, for example. Others even transship their catches offshore to avoid the control. So the consequences are really massive. It's a really complex topic. And despite quotas and regulation, it still remains kind of a moving target, which makes technologies and cooperation essential. I would like you to take a moment just to talk about how technologies is changing the fight against IUU fishing.
Maybe I can start with a little bit more of explanation on what is IUU for the listeners.
Of course.
Because, as you said, is one of the biggest threats to sustainable fisheries and marine biodiversity as well, worldwide. It's a worldwide phenomenon, right? But what is IUU? I mean, first of all, IUU fishing, stands for illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So it's 3 different terms. It's not only illegal. Okay, so illegal fishing, it's basically fishing vessels operating in the violation of laws and regulations. So where you have regulations, some of them, they just violate those regulations. That's illegal fishing. Unreported fishing, it's fishing activities that are not reported or are misreported to relevant authorities. Okay, for instance, under declaring catch volumes, saying, I'm fishing 50 tons of tuna when you're fishing 200 tons. Okay, this is unreported fishing. And then you have unregulated fishing. It's basically fishing in areas where there is no effective management measures existing, right? So it's just not regulated. Okay, so this is IUU. So it's 3 main things that you're trying to tackle: illegal fishing, unreported fishing, and regulated fishing. Now, how authorities combat IUU fishing? Basically through, first of all, satellite surveillance. Instead with BMS. So monitoring system, it's a way of combating IUU fishing with AIS for some of them, other technologies just to track vessel movements. There is also, state measures where basically requiring to inspect and verify landings. Okay, so that's a way of fighting illegal fishing, just inspecting and verifying that landings are properly declared or reported. You have regional corporations as well with regional fisheries management organization, and that's really critical, and data sharing. Of course, you have digital traceability systems to follow where it's been fished or catch or to the consumer. You've got like platforms like our Themis, which is a software for fishing monitoring centers where you integrate data and generate alerts on suspicious activity. Now, you were asking how does satellite monitoring, helps detecting suspicious activity. First of all, tracking, whether it's AIS, whether it's VMS, having the ability to transmit a vessel identity, its position, its speed and course to the authority. It's really critical for vessel movements, for instance, also to detect unusual patterns, like loitering, sudden course changes, and then you can cross-check as well, what has been reported as a fishing activity with its actual behavior, and it has to be related. You were talking about detecting dark vessels, the ghost vessels, the famous dark vessels. Of course, you can use satellite monitoring to do that. Of course, dark vessel, they don't carry AIS, or they just turn it off. Dark vessel, they don't carry VMS most of the time, because that's a system that you cannot turn off, for instance. So to the technology you're going to use to let's say identify dark vessel is more radar, synthetic aperture radar. It works day and night. It works through cloud. It's far more powerful than optical imagery, for instance. And basically the idea here is to detect metal objects. So let's say fishing vessel on the surface of the ocean, right? And what you can do is, for instance, cross-reference AIS data or VMS data with SAR technology. So basically, if you have a picture of a vessel, a fishing vessel, somewhere in the middle of the ocean where you don't have any position coming from AIS or VMS, most probably this is a dark vessel.
Yeah, I think it's really important saying that there is this multi-source data like AIS, VMS, radar, optical satellite, even oceanographical data like play in identifying illegal fishing patterns. And I think it's really important.
You were saying optical data, infrared imagery as well, radio frequency detection as well. It's other technology that can be used. So you have many, many, many sources of data that can be used to fight illegal fishing.
I think it's really important for us to understand how it works and what are the tools that are available. And this mention of the combination of different digital tools.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Go ahead.
It's a bit of a cliche, right? But it's something that we already use. It is already been used by providers, by NGOs as well, for instance. It's artificial intelligence or machine learning. I prefer machine learning, actually, in terms of fishery surveillance. It's a real tool that can be useful. It's a bit of a cliche because we talk about AI all the time, okay? But that's something where for fisheries management and specifically to fight against illegal fishing, it's something that is really useful. I was talking about pattern recognition before. You need AI to be able to use all the data that you have, all the tracking data, for instance, to detect, let's say, unusual movements or patterns. You can detect anomalies as well. For instance, a vessel entering into a restricted zone, that's something that where AI is really useful. And the beauty of it for me, for AI, it's the kind of what we call the minority report. It's predictive analytics where basically you use models and AI based on historical data tracking, for instance, cross-checking that data with, for instance, ocean conditions and cross-checking with data coming from electronic logbooks, basically. So tracking, ocean conditions, catch reporting. You can use these three sources of data and sets of data which are different, and cross-check them, to forecast, for instance, where in the next week there is a high probability to have fishing activities, because that illegal fishing activity, they happen where there is fishing. So as long as you know where in the next days there will most probably be fishing activities, you can allocate resources for compliance enforcement there, because those resources they're limited for patrols, for coast guards, for instance. So you can allocate resources in let's say fishing grounds where there are going to be most probably a fishing activity and most probably an illegal fishing activity. So AI is a very strong and powerful tool for that.
Yeah, AI is really important in the case where you have a huge amount of data, and that's what you just say about, like we combine multiple sources of data, and so we need to train models to say, okay, when there is this condition 1, 2, and 3, what could be the consequences, and prioritize to allocate, the fleet for the local authorities to be there
Yes.
and combine these practices. So it's really being efficient, right to the point, but based on the real data, backed up with science and AI. So yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. I think it's important that it's not just like data, it's also decision-making support.
Exactly.
And how to combat this. So thank you very much. Now I would like to go on another challenge that is closely linked to fisheries, which is marine pollution, especially ghost gear and abandoned nets. It's estimated that 640,000 tons of fishing gears are lost or abandoned at sea every year, which make around 10% of marine plastic pollutions. And actually, again, digital tools can help us track and reduce it. So can you give us some examples or initiative where CLS are working directly with fishers to reduce or track ghost gear? Is it something that is in your pipeline, and some success stories you have about that?
Yes, it is actually. Thank you for asking the question. Yes, marine litter is a critical issue as well. And as you say, 10% of actual plastic pollution in the ocean is coming from fishing activities, let's say. So basically, when satellites and digital platforms, they're increasingly used to monitor marine litter. It's what we call abandoned, lost, or discarded fishing gears, ALDFG. So as you say, you often refer it as ghost gear. I mean, these tools, they help authorities, researchers, community to detect, to track, and try to manage marine debris effectively. How do we do that? It's pretty straightforward, actually. The very simple thing to do, for instance, if you want to be able to recover fishing gears, is just to first identify them and track them. It's not always possible. All fishing gear cannot be tracked or recovered because it would be massive investment to do that. But we know that some of the fishing gears that are used actually and most of the time by industrial fishing fleets, like fishing aggregating devices, what we call FATs, drifting FATs, we know that they have a massive impact on marine litter. So what we do at CLS, what we are developing actually, is trying to develop a full solution for tracking FATs. So it starts with a tracker, so a simple tracker on a FAD, transmitting the positions of the FAD, so being able to track the FAD. It's able to carry its identity as well, which is maybe a serial number or something else, carry information on the owner, who's the owner of that FAD, who's been deploying that FAD actually at sea, because the ownership of the FAD, of the fishing gear, generally speaking, is an issue, okay? And then all this data, all this information, you have to be able to collect it and to transmit it, of course. So you need satellite connectivity to do that, because basically they're drifting at sea, deep sea most of the time, following currents. So you need satellite connectivity to collect that data, and then you need again some kind of platform software to be able to aggregate all that data and to make it useful and visible to the authority. Not only the authority, but as well the scientists that can use it. And why you do that basically is you generate data, you collect that data, you make it available, so people have a better insight on the importance of marine litter and can try to build policies or management plans to be able to recover those fishing gears, for instance. I think recovering fishing gears is really critical, especially when they're made out of plastic, not only, but out of plastic. And then it's not about satellite technology, but I think the best way as well to reduce marine litter is to use fishing gears that are made of natural fiber. For instance, I think it's the best way to start with, not using plastic for fishing gear, but that's not possible for all of the fishing gears.
A really, really important point. And actually, there is a project called Blue Mission Med regarding the detection, the collection, and also the valorization of pollution in the Mediterranean Sea. And there is actually a French startup focusing on having like fish net with biomaterials. I remember the program was like NetTag. It was about like the Tunisian using also this kind of tracking. So not only the scientific community, not only the policies, the local authorities, but also how the fishermen can use these digital tools to also, gain and be more responsible in their practices. So I think it's also having all the people again at the same table to have better sustainable practices at sea.
Exactly.
And speaking on that, because we talk a lot about all these incredible technologies, there is also a question that comes to my mind is how to build a sustainable business around it. Because, who are your customer? Who are your main clients today? Is it more like government, regional fisheries management organization, NGOs, private sector players? How do you make money at CLS in the fisheries department?
Okay, I can confirm we try to make some money out of this business because we are a business. Okay, we're a mission-driven company. CLS is a mission-driven company. Basically, it's trying to better understand our planet. But most importantly, trying to manage its resources sustainably. Okay, and when we talk about fishing or fisheries, we talk most of the time about sustainable management. Okay, so we're a mission-driven company. But as any company, we're a business, and we make profits. And these profits, actually, we reinvest them into R&D, into many things, that we hope are useful for a more sustainable management of fisheries, right? So our clients, we have a diverse and global client base, right? It's across the public and the private sector. They are all focused, concentrated on sustainable fisheries management, marine conservation, and compliance monitoring, but also on fishing operations. So we work with governments, of course, because they are the regulators, basically national governments and national fisheries authorities. They're the one regulating their own activity into the EEZ. So at CLS, we work with more than 95 countries worldwide, but most of them, we supply them with fisheries monitoring centers, so softwares, vessel monitoring systems, so trackers, let's say, and more softwares for electronic catch reporting and more solutions to fight against IUU fishing. So that's mainly national bodies, but we also work with what we call RFMOs, regional fisheries management organizations. So we try to support those regional cooperation by providing shared surveillance platforms. That's our themis. Okay. Cross-border data integration, because being regional, their jurisdiction is most of the time regional and most of the time out of the EEZ, of the national jurisdictions, So cross-border data integration is really important for them. And again, we're trying to give them more insights to complete their own missions in terms of surveillance, in terms of control, in terms of monitoring, in terms of fish stock evaluation, for instance. Okay. And of course, we work with small-scale fisher and cooperative producer organizations, sometimes unions. We try to work with them to implement regulation, to innovate on what they can do to bring them more data, make it visible, as we were saying previously. We also work with fishing companies. I mean, industrial fishing companies, they have a huge impact, and they are more and more interested into sustainability because it's just not only a word, but if they want to have market access for their products, they need to show somehow that, their fisheries is properly managed. So they can go through MSC certifications, for instance. So we give them data and tools and insight for them to be able to be certified. We share with them data as well on their operations to be more effective for reducing fuel consumptions, for instance, which is critical to them. 60% of their cost is fuel. Okay. So yeah, we have many tools. And last but not least, we work with NGOs and international organizations also. We collaborate with FAO, WWF that you were talking about, Nature Conservancy, Environmental Defense Fund, for instance. We work with international organizations such as DG Mare in Europe. They're funding projects, but we work with them. And basically what we want to do here is contribute to Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So yeah, we're a business, we're a mission-driven company. We work with everybody.
Actually, it gives me hope because it's not only one actors of the value chain that, is involved in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And there is like both public, private, and also I like the way you present it. I just put my marketing hat right now, saying that maybe if you're private fleet, it's more about how to optimize with the fuel consumption, for example, or how to get some certification and label. So having this kind of data to have more like customers and have better access to the market, but also about the better governance and management. So I like how for each persona, we call it in marketing, you have different offers and different value and benefits. But just one question, because, okay, satellite data is often seen as something really expensive. But when we talk together, you talk a lot about how you make it accessible to small-scale fisheries or developing countries. I think you already answered to that question before. You just say that sometimes like you have a regional platform, so like countries can, collaborate because it's important in terms of efficiency to have a regional view. But I think also on an economical perspective, it could be interesting. So how do you make this accessible for this kind of actors?
Okay. You're absolutely right. Satellite data traditionally has been seen as expensive and kind of out of reach, at least for some maybe developing countries or for small-scale fisheries as well. But CLS, and other organizations, not only CLS, but CLS, we've been developing several strategies to make technology more accessible and affordable. We're talking about scalability here, about low-cost devices. For instance, for small-scale fisheries, we've been global leader in terms of vessel monitoring system applied to industrial fishing sector. Okay, but as you said, traditional fisheries have a huge impact. Okay, so we've been developing technologies that were maybe not as affordable as expected by our clients, but that were clearly not accessible for small-scale fishermen, for instance. So who pays for that? So our challenge, at CLS is to be able to develop low-cost devices, okay, or lower-cost devices, that small-scale fishermen can afford. So we've been working hard here to reduce the cost of the hardware, right? For instance, a tracker. A tracker used to be, 2,000 euros, the late 90s, 2,000 euros. Now, that cost for tracking a small fishing vessel has been reduced by 4 times, maybe. Now it's more for 500 euros. It's still a lot of money for some of them, and we are fully aware of that. But we are working hard to reduce the cost of the hardware. We are also working hard to reduce the cost of the satellite connectivity. As you said, as we said previously, satellite connectivity was really expensive. Nowadays it's becoming more and more common to use satellite for phone calls, for instance, but for all sorts of data sharing. And we've been working with a company called Kineis, which is a subsidiary
Your
of
new
CLS.
constellation.
Yeah, it's our new constellation. It's about nanosatellites here. So over the past 10 years now, we've been working hard, to deploy a new satellite constellation called Kineis. It's nanosatellites. Okay, so it's small shoeboxes that we've been sending in the space. Right, it's really shoeboxes. It's the size of a shoebox. With the ability to lower the cost of satellite connectivity. Okay. And of course, there is a device, but there is the service coming with it. It's like a cell phone. You have your cell phone plus the subscription to be able to use your cell phone. That's exactly the same for tracking fishing vessels. You need a device, but you need a satellite connectivity. So we've been working hard here to reduce also the cost of satellite connectivity through Kineis, okay, for instance, by more than 3 times. And also, we've been developing devices that can work on cellular networks, which is a lot cheaper compared to satellite connectivity too. So it's several initiatives to try to make our service more affordable. For some fisheries, for some countries, it will always be too expensive. Okay? And then we come to a critical issue, which is about how do we fund fisheries management? Where do we find money? Who's going to pay for that? Do we have proper funding policies, to help maybe more artisanal fishermen community to afford such services? So that's a whole question in itself. So we try to work also here with NGOs, with foundations, with governments, with international institutions such as FAO, World Bank, for instance, to be able to finance projects for more sustainable fisheries management for artisanal fishermen.
Thank you very much for sharing this initiative. I really like the fact that there are, multiple actions. So first, of course, R&D, so new constellations such as Kineis, or to help to reduce the cost with low tech to adapt it to the need of small-scale fisheries, for example. Also, the fact that you have kind of a business model where you are selling the raw data, the concrete platforms, but also the hardware. So you can find a way to make it affordable by, playing on these different parameters. And also, I'm assuming as you're a big company, a mission-driven company, and you have different sectors of activities, maybe one sectors of CLS can help in terms of finance, help support small scale fisheries or fishing activities in general with the support of, as you mentioned, FAO, World Bank, the GFCM, for example. So I really like this combination of business model and research and development to make solution more accessible. I just want to talk about something. We have open data initiative.
Yeah.
Like Copernicus, Mercator Ocean, with many projects, and specifically in Europe with a digital twin of the ocean. And so how do you differentiate your solution from these free data sources, or how do you integrate the movement? What's your position in this, new wave of open data in the ocean?
Okay, you were talking about Copernicus, which is a European program, a really interesting European program, open data program to share scientific data on the oceans mainly. You have to know that CLS contributes to Copernicus ocean monitoring indicators. Okay, actually, we have production chains here. We provide information on sea level rise, for instance, to Copernicus, ocean hint content. Okay, and we do that by processing satellite altimetry data. So we are a provider of data to Copernicus, but we are also a user of Copernicus data, for instance. We integrate this open data into our solutions, okay, and we make it available nearly for free to our users. I mean, we were talking about fisheries national authorities, when they have a fishing monitoring center, they're interested into VMS, AIS, and all these data, but they're also interested in having more information on weather, on the ocean conditions, and so on. So this Copernicus data, we use it and we display it and we make it available through our softwares to our users. Not only the authorities, of course, but sometimes also the fishermen. Okay, it's open data, it's for free. So why not making it available to as much users as possible? So yeah, we're both a provider and a user of Copernicus data. So open data is really important to us too.
Yeah, I can see it's part of your DNA too, and you are really part of the
It is.
ecosystem
It
on
is.
that.
We're a real part of the ecosystem on that. Yeah. And that's
Great.
part of our mission, actually.
So now just let's project ourselves a bit into the future. That's really like a personal question for you. What new technology do you see shaping digital fisheries over the next, like, say, 5-10 years? Like you talk about nanosatellites, maybe blockchain, AI, IoT. What do you think would be the next things in digital fisheries?
Okay. It's hard to say in the 5 to 10 coming years, right? Because you never know the speed of adoption of new technologies. But definitely, in terms of technology that will shape fisheries tomorrow, AI will be one of them. Predictive analysis on behaviors, on fish stocks, for instance, because we have many data that we don't really use nowadays or that are not properly used. Okay, and AI is a tool that will enable us and authorities as well to have more insight on the data, okay, which are really, to me, important in terms of policies and fisheries management. So AI, yes, it's a cliche, but it's going to be a tool which is going to be more and more rapidly used for fisheries management. I think we were talking about IoT. IoT is the next thing as well in terms of connectivity. More affordable connectivity is really critical, and all technologies reducing the cost of collecting data through satellite will be more than welcome and will be quickly adopted. I think that's the main three. I'm not talking about blockchain because blockchain to me is not as mature as it should be. And I mean, it's hard now to foresee the real value of blockchain applied to fisheries. But yeah, definitely AI, definitely IoT. And yes, there is one technology which is really important to me, is using our brains. We need to think about what we want to do with fisheries. Okay, it's not only AI, it's human intelligence too. Education, right? Education is such a powerful tool. You were talking about the artisanal fishermen in the Mediterranean Sea previously, educating our fishermen to have better behaviors, to apply good practices, to have common sense, not to be only predators. In terms of technology, the human brain is really at the center to me. It's not only, we can't only rely on technology.
I think it's my favorite one, the brain technology. Thank you for pointing that way. And actually, I always like to end this conversation on a personal note. So, what advice would you give to a young innovator, a student, researchers, or an organization looking to launch a project in digital fisheries or blue economy, marine conservation? What would be your advice to this new generation?
Be open-minded, right? Be open-minded, be disruptive, try to bring value. Most of the time, technology is fantastic, right? But most of the time, technology stays at a project level, okay? What's important with technology is the scalability. Because if you want the technology to be used, to be applied for what it's intended to do, scalability is really important. So you have to be open-minded and you have to think forward on how is it going to be of value to the fishermen, whether industrial or artisanal? What is the value of what I am bringing, of my idea, I would say. So being disruptive, being open-minded, to me is really the first advice that I would give to a young innovator. Try it, go for it, whether it works or not doesn't matter really. I think it's for the benefit of us all. Okay, so that would be my advice, and that's actually the kind of advice I'm trying to give to my team, to the people I work with. Making a mistake, making an error is not really important. It's just trying, which is important. And some of the time it works, and that's really fine.
Thank you very much for this inspiring notes and advice for, I say, the next generation, but also all of us, actually,
Yeah.
who want to jump in some blue project, as I love to call them. So thank you very much, Hervé. So today we really cover like how to empower small-scale fishers, how to fight illegal fishing and tackling marine pollution. We also saw that digital transformation is opening a new chapters for the fisheries sectors. And what I love the most about CLS Works is really that it shows that technology isn't just about satellite and data, even if you are really good at it, but it's also about people. It's about like protecting the ecosystem and supporting like the million who depend on them and the different actors, the fishermen, the coastal communities, the local authorities. So really having the people in mind. And maybe just to end on a more personal reflection, I truly believe that, okay, why technology is essential, it's only part of the equation, and the real challenge and the real opportunity actually is how we integrate it in the daily reality of fishes. We already talked about that in the episode, but I think it's really important making sure that these digital tools are adopted, not just available, and that they answer to real needs and that they fit into their existing practices and that they empower people, because that's when like the technology stop being just a tool and become more like kind of a driver of transformation for the whole industry and the world sectors. So yeah, that was my personal
Absolutely
note on
right.
that.
Fully agree with you on
So
that.
so, Hervé, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight on this episode.
Thank you, Marilu. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. And to our listener, thank you for turning into BlueTech Around the World. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone who loves the ocean, and join us next time we explore the innovation shaping the future of our blue planet. Thank you very much.
BlueTech around the world.